Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on December 31st at 17:25 Eastern Time. Said he dropping out of view, probably. As you heard in the previous video, Paul had a very eventful couple of days. And I had sort of a kind of eventful day in addition to picking Paul up from the hospital and so forth. I helped our rector move some of his office materials down to his new church. St. Philip's Episcopal Church down on it's on the east side of Columbus. 166 Woodland Avenue, Columbus, Ohio. And it wasn't surprising. I mean, you could not have gone more smoothly. I met him up there at St. Peter's, and he had this custom-made cabinet that a fellow had made for him shortly after he arrived at St. Peter's. And he painted it with these sort of very subdued reds, yellows, greens, and browns. Well, the brown was the natural color of the wood, but the facing, the facing stuff on the doors and the shelves, and then the trim in between and slightly around the frame of the doors, and then he's got a couple of little things underneath. Absolutely beautiful. And so he wanted that down. That thing was, well, it was just a hair under 6.5 feet, because it actually, it was probably 7 feet high rather. Well, long when it fit in the bed of the truck, because I've got a 6.5 foot bed. But with the tailgate down, it didn't hang over the tailgate, so we didn't have to do the red flag out back stuff. And it was easy enough to tie secure the thing with the parachute cord and with the 2 D-rings in back. And then he had several boxes of books, some of which he put in his Volvo, and then others he put sort of sitting at an angle in the cabinet so that they wouldn't shift about, because they're sort of anchored by having their corners down in the cabinet. And there was like a tree rack, like a hat tree, one of these old-fashioned hat trees with the brass fixtures on top. And he had these big bamboo plants that, we all got that all fit into the open end of the truck very nicely. And then he had a church pew with an attached kneeler that he had gotten from Trinity down in Columbus when he was starting out in seminary and studying and this, that, and the other. And it actually slid into the folded, with the seats on my, I've got 4 doors, and you've got a full back seat in my truck. And you fold the seat up, and you've got it's like a platform. Now Paul's is even nicer. You have a full platform in his, but this was such that it slid in just fine and just fit, and then leaned against the back of the front seats, and was quite safe and secure. And then there was some other plant that, unfortunately, I don't know. I'm not a plant guy. It seemed that it decided to amputate part of itself when we looked at it after we had arrived. But he had a fellow from upstairs in the Franklin Street Parish House to help, and then he had a fellow that taught Latin at the Columbus Academy to help, follow him down and help him unload at St. Philip's. And there was this really, really nice guy down there who helped as well. He had these dollies. He had two dollies. He actually had like a dolly, and then he had like a cart, with a flatbed cart thing like you see at an airport, or like when you're unloading into a dorm room, that sort of thing. Or I suppose bringing luggage out of a hotel. And the interesting thing about this man was, all the time he was talking with me and working, he obviously had some sort of big eating cancer on the side of his face. And it wasn't really actively bleeding, but it was actively oozing, and he had this sort of rag taped over it. And it was one of these things that, when the man's talking to you, you don't know what to look at. I see, as a physician, of course, I long to ask him to take that thing off so I could look at this stuff. Look at this thing. But of course I didn't. But I kept sort of almost saying, look, I'm a retired doc. I absolutely have to see this thing on your face. But I didn't. Well, inquiring minds want to know. I think you guys know that I kind of like really well, grotesque plus. This wasn't a sore. This was clearly something that was eating away at this man.
Well, I'd call it a sore.
Well, I'm sure it was a sore thing for him. He was sore afflicted. Let's put it that way. Well, that unloading went fairly well. Nobody was hurt. Nobody fell down, although there were a couple of close calls. And met some folks down there. It's a very busy church. I mean, it's considerably bigger than, in terms of a physical plant, than St. Peter's. He said it's about the same size. It's not the same size. It's probably about 2.5, 3 times as big as in terms of square footage. And they've been doing a lot of adding on and building. And he showed me, the entire place, and and the fellow that came down to help us, or help him rather, and then the other fellow showed us around a little bit more, and then he took us into the sanctuary again, the nave, and went into a long, detailed description of the lighting travails. Now, see, this church was built in the 1960s, and it's like an A-frame design. The main nave area and chancel area is a A-frame design, and he says the lighting was such that in order to change any of these bulbs, it requires a tremendous amount of scaffolding and ladders and risk of life and limb, and he went on and on and on about it, which I don't blame him. And he says, well, we're going to try to switch to compact fluorescent lights on some of these things, and ideally LEDs, if we could afford all the LEDs. And well, of course, once you have your sunk costs covered with LEDs, they're going to save you a lot of money. Plus, you can vary them, and with the intensity and the colors and things, and so they're thinking about that. And then with all the heat, with the A-frame, the heat goes right up to the top. So you can have the heat blowing away all winter, and it's still cold on the floor. And so we need to get ceiling fans to blow that heat down on the congregation. He says, we've talked about it for years, but nobody's ever done stuff. So it was a very interesting glimpse into the logistics of a very badly designed building. And on the way out, after he'd gotten done showing me this, I turned to him and I said, I bet you there's some architect somewhere going, yo ho ho, yo ho ho. You know, I really have these people scrambling around and being frustrated now forever and ever. Oh man, yo ho ho. He kind of allowed as how that might be the case. So then the rector drove us over to where his new house is going to be, and it's this, it's this like huge 3-story, 3,500 square foot, restored. Paul would call it a mansion on Bryden Road there in Columbus, in Old Town East. It's all been gentrified, been very gentrified, and. No, it looks like a heck of a nice place if you can take care of something that big. Better him than me. And he said the third story used to be old servants' quarters. Because this was built like in the late 1880s, when the wealthy people in Columbus lived out in that area of town. Yeah. Well, I don't know, it was Old Town East. It was. I don't think they called it that then. That's what it's called now. But it was out on Bryden Road, and which at that time was kind of initially a country road, but then became, I suppose you would call that an early suburban road. In any case, it looks nice. It's sort of the Stalin-esque era brown brick, but it wasn't built in the 50s. It doesn't look like a Stalinist apartment block. No, it's a very nice. It was probably considered very much ahead of its time at the time. Yeah, that's going to be a hell of a bitch to heat, I'll tell you. Well, ain't my problem. But it was nice to see where we didn't go in because the woman that owns it and is now, I guess, renting it till they actually moved. She lost her mother, and then 2 days later her dad. Well, she didn't lose them; they died. Her mother died. Her dad. No, she didn't lose them. They weren't like they were misplaced. They didn't pass either. They just died. When you die, you die. You don't pass, you die. So he said it probably wouldn't be appropriate to barge in on her, and I thought, well, that's really a very reasonable thing to not do to this poor soul. Well, so that was sort of like the early part of my day, and then Paul called, almost very shortly after I got home. I got home around a little after 1 in the afternoon. And yeah, you called about 1:40. Yeah.
Well, you called first.
I didn't call you. Well, I called you really in the morning. I mean, I called you before I started off on the Rector quest here. Rector help, but
okay.
Yeah. No, that I called you.
Around 7:38.
Yeah, 7:45 maybe. Yeah. Well, that's been our day. That's been our last couple of days, guys. Oh, now, little YouTube housekeeping matter. My YouTube sites on either Safari or Chrome, on both Safari and Chrome, are, it's not letting me leave primary comments on videos I watch on the YouTube page. I can leave replies to comments that people make on my videos. But I can't leave primary comments on other YouTubers' videos. I don't know I don't think this is some malware. I think I'm being selected as a sample. I think YouTube's doing an experiment, or Google's doing an experiment. They're trying to force me onto Google Plus. That ain't going to happen, YouTube, Google. So hear up. Let me comment on these guys on YouTube. Otherwise, a lot of the, well, not a lot, a lot of the fun will go out of it. And I think, some folks, oh, he's not commenting, he doesn't care, screw him. No. Well, anyway, we shall see how that develops. So I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTube. Okay. Here. It's 20 degrees in Ithaca, New York.